We're always taught that the word extinct means gone forever, the absolute end of the line. But what if it actually isn't? In this explainer, we're going to look at some truly fascinating creatures that once roamed the earth. These are animals you probably thought were lost to the pages of history forever, but right now, science and nature are literally pulling them back from the abyss.
4 billion. That's not an exaggeration. That is the staggering number of species that have gone extinct throughout Earth's long history. Now, extinction is a natural process, but our current rate is, well, it's anything but natural. However, the narrative is totally shifting. Modern biotechnology and incredibly dedicated conservation efforts are changing the rules of the game, giving us this unprecedented ability to reverse what we always thought was permanent.
So, we're going to map out 4 distinct paths of return today: rewriting DNA, the cloning milestone, hiding in plain sight, and finally, saved from the brink. Let's just dive right in. We're kicking things off with the most futuristic path: rewriting DNA. This is where scientists are stepping out of the traditional lab and straight into the realm of science fiction. First up is the Smilodon, or as you probably know it, the saber-toothed tiger. Imagine a fearsome predator walking around with literal 11-inch upper teeth. It vanished about 10,000 years ago, right as the Ice Age was ending. But here's the crazy part. Because we keep finding these beautifully preserved frozen skeletons in places like Alaska and Siberia, scientists can actually extract real DNA fragments. To bring them back, experts are analyzing the genetic overlaps between these ancient fossils and modern big cats, like lions, tigers, and snow leopards. So how on earth does this de-extinction process actually work in practice? First, scientists extract that ancient fragmented DNA. Second, they match it up with modern relatives to essentially fill in the missing puzzle pieces. And third, they use CRISPR-Cas9, which you can think of as highly advanced molecular scissors, to literally cut and paste the ancient genes right into the modern DNA. It honestly sounds like magic, though repairing that ancient DNA damage definitely remains a massive hurdle.
But the optimism here is off the charts. Thanks to some incredibly well-preserved fossils discovered in the Russian ice back in 2017, the scientific community actually has a target date. Experts genuinely believe that if these gene transfers between the different cat species work out, we could see a living, breathing, hybrid saber-tooth return between 2040 and 2050. I mean, that is literally right around the corner.
Okay, our next genetic candidate is an absolute giant: the massive Irish elk. Try to picture creatures standing 7 feet tall at the shoulder, carrying sprawling 12-foot antlers. They were wiped out by climate change and human hunting about 7,700 years ago, but their path of return looks a lot like the saber-tooths. Scientists are splicing ancient DNA from Siberian ice directly into the genes of modern elk and red deer, step by step trying to recover their size, their color, and of course, those magnificent antlers. While DNA fragmentation is still a roadblock here too, the timeline is actually even closer. By utilizing advanced tech and multiple samples they've gathered from Ireland and Russia, experts predict they could completely map the full Irish elk genome by 2035. That literally means a baby Irish elk could be born in our lifetimes. All right, let's transition over to our second path of return. This is a story that gave scientists the ultimate proof of concept, and it's honestly one of the most bittersweet milestones in scientific history. Meet the Pyrenean ibex. This was a stunning 80-kilogram horned wild goat that used to gracefully roam the mountains right between France and Spain. But despite being a totally peaceful herbivore, its numbers just absolutely plummeted because of human greed. It was hunted relentlessly for its meat and its massive horns throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, pushing the species right to the very edge. By 1980, they were nearly gone. Then, in January of 2000, a bizarre tragedy struck. A falling tree completely crushed the very last surviving female in the wild, a goat named Celia. The species was officially declared extinct. But before she died, scientists actually managed to preserve some of her skin cells. Fast forward 3 years to 2003, they transferred her DNA into a domestic goat embryo. Against all odds, a cloned Pyrenean ibex was born. Sadly though, just 7 minutes later, the baby clone passed away from lung complications. Now, even though that baby ibex only survived for 7 brief minutes, it completely shattered a massive scientific barrier. For the very first time in human history, an entirely extinct species had been brought back to Earth. It was the absolute proof of concept we needed. Bringing back the dead wasn't just theory anymore, it was scientifically possible.
Pivoting away from the microscopes and gene editing, our third path of return relies on the incredible resilience of nature itself. It's about species hiding right in plain sight. Take the takahe, for instance. This is a highly unique, flightless bird native to New Zealand. You'd know it by its dark blue body, light green wings, and this really strong red beak it uses to eat tussock grass. But when European settlers arrived in the 19th century, they rapidly clear out the forests and grasslands. Stripped of its habitat and hunted down, the takahe's numbers crashed, and it was officially declared extinct in 1898. For a long time, everybody thought it was gone forever. But then, decades later, a survey team led by Dr. Jeffrey Orbell was trekking through the Murchison Mountains, and they literally stumbled upon a hidden population. On November 20, 1948, the takahe was officially back from the dead. They had just been hiding deep in the wilderness, quietly surviving totally out of human sight.
We saw something super similar with the Vietnamese mouse deer. This animal literally looks like a mix between a mouse and a tiny deer, with this beautiful reddish-brown coat and a silver-gray sheen. It lived in the tropical forests of South Vietnam, but it completely vanished from human sight after 1910. For over a century, it only existed in old textbooks and local folklore. Then, in an absolute miracle for the wildlife world back in 2019, wildlife experts placed some hidden camera traps in the Nha Tran forest, and guess what? The cameras captured 3 live mouse deer. It proved that this elusive little creature had been quietly surviving out there all along. It was a massive rediscovery that sent shockwaves through the scientific community.
And that brings us to our fourth and final path of return. This one is all about humanity stepping up to actively fix the catastrophic damage we caused.
The European bison is an absolute behemoth, weighing anywhere up to 900 kilograms, with a massive shoulder hump, thick brown fur, and heavy horns. They used to dominate the forests of Spain, Poland, and Russia. But during the sheer desperation and chaos of World War II, out-of-control hunting wiped them out entirely in the wild. Basically, overnight, Europe's forests were emptied of their largest grazers.
But thankfully, human foresight kicked in just in the nick of time. A tiny handful of these magnificent beasts, only about 50 of them, were still alive in captivity across various farms, zoos, and private parks. So dedicated conservationists used these survivors to launch an intense breeding program. Slowly but surely their numbers grew, and they were eventually released back into the wild, proving that when we actually coordinate our efforts, we can reverse the damage.
So, we've covered genetics, cloning, miraculous survival, and dedicated conservation. What does all of this actually mean for the future of our planet? Well, the ultimate takeaway from this explainer is actually a pretty profound realization. If humans want to, we can bring an extinct animal back. The data is totally clear here. Human ingenuity and biotechnology are finally starting to match human destructiveness. We now hold this unparalleled power over the Earth's biodiversity. We are shifting from being the primary cause of extinction to potentially becoming the architects of return. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Just because we have the technology to play nature's architect, how should we actually wield that power? If humanity has the ability to bring literally any extinct animal back, which one excites you the most? And perhaps more importantly, do we have a moral responsibility to do so? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions and keep learning.